This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
What do you guys want to talk about?
Oh, the Monday shows. How I look forward to the Monday shows. With every fiber of my being. Because you all know what we're in for. The worst wrestling show of all time. That is until it becomes significantly more unbearable the following year. Obviously, I'm referring to Retro Raw from 1994. I say it every week, and I will continue to beat that drum until I puncture a hole through the head. These shows get worse and worse and worse with each passing week. It's like seeping into a vat of molasses. The torture is slow and grueling, and it just keeps sinking further into the abyss every week. And you can't fight it. We're stuck. We've committed to it. Well, we didn't commit to it. I committed to it. You're just all taking the ride with me by force. And I can only imagine how much it'd be suffering if we were still reviewing AEW Collision on top of that. God. I don't think I would have made it through the remainder of the year. I mean, that basically makes SmackDown the de facto good show. And when SmackDown's the good show out of everything we're talking about, boy, do you have a major problem on your hands. Well, I don't know, should we just get into it? Do I even need to bother with the introductions this week? I mean, I can do the channel plugs at the end, if I remember. I probably won't. I mean, I'm more so just looking for an excuse to barrel through this Raw report so we can just talk about SmackDown. Because SmackDown this week was actually a pretty good show, all things considered. Grading on a curve, as usual, but, I mean, watching that after Retro Raw, oh my God. They're not even comparable. Retro Raw, it's like, I mean, I'm trying to think of something more clever than atrocious. Help me out, people. Open your dictionaries up. Give me a couple better synonyms. Abhorrent. Foul. Revolting. Repugnant. The fecal matter of humanity. Well, it's also my favorite time of the year when I go to the WWE library on Peacock, and they got all the season specials on the Watch Now column. And, well, since we are closing in on Halloween, it is only fitting, I guess, that WWE is trying to advertise all the WCW Halloween Havoc pay-per-views. And, Christ, what was the one they had featured the other day? It was when I was trying to set up watching Retro Raw. It was just kind of pinned in the top column. Was it Halloween Havoc 96? Or 97? Can't even remember. I mean, I don't remember a whole lot about the Halloween Havoc specials anyway. If it didn't involve the Yeti, I didn't give a fuck. There's no other iconic Halloween Havoc moment in wrestling than the legendary debut of the Yeti. Gotta say, like Tony Schiavone did. Yeah. The time they took Ron Rice, dressed him up in toilet paper, and then had him go out on live pay-per-view to have a threesome with Hogan and Big Show, where he got to hump Hogan in the ass. The true wrestling moments we all live for. But of course, we're not here to talk about Halloween Havoc. We are here to talk about Retro Raw, which is almost equivalent to getting fucked in the ass. And they may as well have by the time this show is over. I probably would have gotten more enjoyment out of it than watching this appalling piece of crap. I mean, I even had a week to mentally prepare myself for the horrors that was Doink the Clown. And it still drove me up a wall by the time the segment was over. Oh, by the way, they were in Burlington, Vermont. And Vince was incredibly excited to make this announcement. I can think of approximately 0 people in my life that have ever been to and or mentioned Burlington, Vermont offhand. If you put the entire map of Vermont in front of me and you told me to pinpoint where Burlington was, I'd have probably just shaded in the entire state, saying, oh, it's one of those key locations. So the nightmares begin right from the onset. It is Doink versus Double J Jeff Jarrett. What I would normally classify as a dull-looking match on paper is made about 10 times worse when you not only factor in Doink, but you also factor in Dink, Wink, Sleazy, and Queasy, better known as the Dwarves, which is ultimately a teaser for one of the worst Survivor Series matches of all time. And unfortunately, they got poor Jerry Lawler roped into all that garbage. And as bad as that match was, after watching this 10-minute atrocity, I might have to rescind some of my previous comments on that Survivor Series match, because this was fucking putrid. Where to begin? Well, first off, the whole thing is absurd on its face. Before the Jerry Lawler midgets even come out, Dink and Wink, who, mind you, are teaming with the babyface in this equation, they're just out there running blatant interference right in front of the referee for the entire fucking match. Dink's jumping on the apron, getting physical with Double J. Referee's looking right at him. At the very least, you think, well, if he's not going to throw the match out, he would at least have the common courtesy to eject these fucking goofballs from ringside. But no, he just lets him hang out. And then eventually you get Sleazy and Queasy out there. And then the whole thing just turns into one big carny fest. Right before the commercial break, you got Double J tangled up with the clowns in one corner, while the other 2 midgets are stomping a mud hole on Doink on the floor. Again, referee's looking right at him. Does he disqualify anybody? Does he throw the match out? God forbid, does he try to enforce the rules? Nope. He just looks at him and goes, oh, they're short. How much damage could they really inflict? All the while, Jarrett and Doink are having the most mediocre match of all time. And it's not even to say it was bad. They're at least trying to be professional. They're doing mat holds and basic chain wrestling. The problem is when you pile that on top of all the sports entertainment bullshit happening on the floor with the midgets, you're just sitting there wanting to gouge your eyes out the entire time. And we finally get to the finish, where Double J bonks into one of the Lawler midgets. Can't even remember which one it was. All I remember is that when Jarrett collided with this poor man, and this 4'10", 80-pound man crashed to earth, I thought he was deceased. I thought Jarrett just committed involuntary manslaughter on live broadcast television. Somehow the Lawler dwarf was okay. And then they did a bunch of bad comedy at the end with the midgets all chasing each other around ringside. Meanwhile, Doink and Jarrett, as I wrote here, continued to do near falls. I am not kidding you. There's all this shit happening in ringside. There's tiny men running around the ring like wild banshees. Meanwhile, Jeff and Doink are in the ring, just kicking out of moves. They're doing WrestleMania false finishes in this bullshit opening match on Monday Night Raw. I'm slowly ripping strands of hair out of my head watching this, praying for God to have sanity on my well-being and just end this fucking thing. Finally, here comes Lawler in the back door to give Doink a second rope elbow to the back of the head as he throws Double J on Doink's now dead body for the 3 count. Because yes, it was ever so important that Jeff fucking Jarrett needed to go over Doink the Clown in this match. With all the hideous television being perpetrated on my television at that moment. No, of course, Jeff Jarrett still had to leverage himself by saying, "Oh, am I going over in the end, brother?" Incredible. And yes, for those of you curious, we did get confirmation afterwards. The newest addition to Lawler's stable, it was in fact Sleazy. I mean, I just couldn't get over the fact that Doink was put away with a middle rope elbow. God, you see people kick out of the most ludicrous shit anymore. I didn't even put 2 and 2 together that this was a probable finish in the year 1994. What else do you want me to say about it? It was pure trash. I'd like to try and pretend the whole thing was a rib and never happened. And unfortunately, I remember what the payoff was in all this, and it makes all this much more intolerable as a result. God, we still haven't even introduced the final 2 midgets for the opposing teams. Eventually, though, we come back for the British Bulldog versus Roy Raymond, which was a brief little squash victory for Bulldog to go over. Everything was going all right up until the last 30 seconds where it just totally fell off a cliff in a hurry. As Bulldog goes to whip Raymond into the ropes, and I have no idea what was supposed to happen here. Like if Raymond was supposed to reverse the Irish whip. Raymond does a weird rotation off the ropes, sort of bumbles into Davey Boy. Davey Boy attempts to throw a sidekick and completely eat shit. They get totally lost for another minute. And then I think Davey Boy just called an audible and said, "We're taking it home, brother." So he beat him with a running power slam. I put the blame solely on Roy Raymond. And, well, before I get to the Backlund stuff, we get brief footage of Burt Reynolds doing an autograph session. And it's typical meet and greet with the fans, that sort of thing. The highlight here being Macho Man telling Vince, if there was an autobiography written about Vince McMahon, I would want to read it. Moreover, I would like to write it. Yeah, I'll bet he would. That one line could not have been more crystal clear. That was the Macho Man blatantly telling Vince, when my contract expires at the end of the month, I am out of here. Which the thought did occur to me at that point. That's coming up relatively soon, isn't it? The final weeks of the Macho Man's WWF run, right before his departure for WCW. I think Savage was just letting the cat out of the bag at this point. He was so done with this place. And then we got the Bob Backlund promo with Vince at ringside. And this was mainly built around some story follow-up from WWF Superstars the previous weekend, where Mr. Backlund struck again with a devastating chicken wing submission hold. But now, he's crossed the line. He's now stooped to putting his former manager, Arnold Skaaland, in the crossface. The man responsible for bringing him to the promised land. The man that made Bob Backlund a former WWF champion. And after all these years, we find out it was a plot. It was revenge for Skaaland throwing in the towel during Backlund's title match with the Iron Sheik in 1983, costing him the WWF World title as a result. 11 years later, Backlund finally got his revenge. In a story payoff that nobody in the crowd knew about. Guaranteed. This was WWF going full insider here in 1994. Well, moreover, it was about Backlund getting the chance to continue his midlife crisis stage of his gimmick, cutting what had to have been, and listen, I like Bob Backlund, nothing against the guy. This had to be an all-time bad promo. He's just out there bumbling over himself in the worst way imaginable, going off on all these incoherent tangents about the American plebeians. I actually wrote this quote down verbatim. It was so hideously bad. Directly taken from Backlund's mouth. Quote, "I don't eat marijuana, and I don't swear on television." Yes, eat marijuana. Because, you know, those edibles were all the rage back in the day. Even the Macho Man couldn't help but poke fun at that on commentary. He was blaming the fans for allowing their children to swear in school and smoke crack and become failures at life. Again, I have no idea what the hell he's talking about. At this point, I'm cringing as Backlund is trying to get through this promo without losing his train of thought. Finally, things come to a head when who should come out to interrupt, of all people, but Lex Luger. And he challenges Backlund to a fight. And then Luger just walks off, while Backlund is in the ring waiting for him. I wrote down, this was hideously terrible. But you know what? It was still 1,000 times better than that fucking Doink match. Not even close. Think about that for a minute. Even a truly awful Bob Backlund promo supersedes Doink the Clown in the Midgets. Any day of the week. Meanwhile, WWF tries desperately to try to keep Lex Luger relevant for another year while he waits out his contract. Moving on with this awful show, I'm going to try to get through these next few segments as quickly as humanly possible. Spark Plug Bob Holly versus Reno Riggins. I believe the first time they've actually acknowledged him as Bob Holly on TV, as opposed to Sparky. Here's everything you need to know. Holly finally got better ring gear, and he won with a crossbody in 2 minutes. If there's anything of note I missed in there, someone can go back and rewatch the tape and fill me in. And honestly, the same goes for IRS versus Tim McNeely. The highlight of this being Rotunda referring to The Undertaker as a, quote, tax cheat. Which was funny. Because if there's one universal truth we know about dead people, well, they have been known to cheat on their taxes. Beyond that, it was a total nothing squash. IRS beat up McNeely and then won with a penalty submission in like 90 seconds. But on the subject of The Undertaker, he's got other important matters to address. Specifically, scaring Yokozuna with caskets. And I have to admit, while it probably shouldn't be as funny as I'm making it out to be, the visual of seeing Yokozuna oversell and overbump at the mere sight of an open casket, it is quite entertaining. It's preposterous. But when they showed the footage of Yokozuna freaking out on WWF Superstars, when Paul Bearer slowly wheels an open casket to ringside to spoof him, and Yoko turns around and sees the open casket and he gets all bug-eyed, he did a great job selling it. It is the fastest you have ever seen a 700-pound man flee for his life. Maybe there's more to this story than what they're mentioning on television. Maybe Taker was trying to secretly help Yokozuna with his cardio. He wasn't trying to steal his soul. Wasn't trying to bury him 10 feet under the dirt. He just wanted Yoko to lose a little bit of weight. So he kept scaring him on TV as a means of giving Yoko a cardio workout. That way he could do a 100-yard dash every week. And they say Taker was a heartless bastard. Come on now. Well, anyway. The TV main event was the Heavenly Bodies versus Nick Barbary and Barry Horowitz. The epitome of gap filler, if there ever was such a thing. I mean, they basically did a minute of the babyfaces running wild on the Bodies. Then they cut off Barbary and worked him over for a minute. And then Jimmy Del Rey hit a sloppy-looking moonsault onto Barbary's kneecaps for the 3. That made, I believe, 3 consecutive TV matches in a row, all of which went a sum total of 5 minutes combined. Hence why I really didn't have a whole lot to say about them. If the Heavenly Bodies wrestled 400 matches in their careers, 398 of them were better than this one. And as I look back here, I think that was everything of note on the entire show. Oh, yes, and Luger issued a challenge to Bobby Backlund next week. How could I neglect to mention Luger referring to Mr. Backlund as Bobby multiple times? As a means to get under his skin, I imagine. That'll be the breaking point. Mr. Backlund being referred to as Bobby. He ain't having that shit, brother. That's disrespectful. But, yep. Another truly dreadful definition of Monday Night Raw. It was all downhill from the opening 2 minutes when I saw Doink come out to the ring with Dink and Wink. Once you introduce those guys into the fold, you immediately got my blood boiling. I mean, I guess if you're looking for actual comedy relief, you might get something of value out of Bob Backlund bumbling over himself on live TV. Other than that, toss that bitch in the wood chipper. Along with the laundry list of most WWF Raws from this year. And then there's SmackDown. Wow. Talk about pulling out all the stops. There's never any middle ground with this show. It's either we're going to book the most mundane, nothing-happening TV show we possibly can, or it's let's just throw every major star we have under contract on the show to try to pop a number. I don't even know what the occasion was this week. Aside from it being the season premiere, which means absolutely nothing to the average wrestling fan, because Well, frankly, who gives a fuck? Season premiere. No. If it means getting more star power on the show, then fine. I'll take it. Even if it's in Tulsa, Oklahoma, of all places. And on the season premiere, I guess it's only fitting that they're going to start hot. So here comes John Felix Anthony Cena down the ramp, looking like a blue raspberry Jolly Rancher. And he gets approximately one word out before getting interrupted by our tribal chief, Roman Reigns, accompanied by Paulie and Solo. Just loading up the show with all the star power from the onset. Trust me, there was more. And I believe I calculated, at the point we got through all the pomp and circumstance and the rigmarole with the ring intros and the pyro and the stalling and the cutesy catchphrases, we were nearly 10 minutes into the program before anything actually happened. There's a term for this. It's called milking. Perhaps a little too much of it. In any case, I talked about Cena. By the time this segment was over, he was sort of a non-factor. I mean, Roman basically used Cena as a placemat to tell him, y'all better get out of my ring if you know what's good for you. And Cena told Roman that he's actually here to throw him a curveball this time. He's not here to challenge Roman for the Universal title. He's here to acknowledge Roman, saying that being world champion for over 1,000 days is nothing to scoff at. Cena acknowledges that he has not earned the right to challenge Roman, but he knows somebody who has earned the right, with everybody saying his name, L.A. Knight. Yeah. So, of course, here comes Knight. Nuclear pop for the entrance, I might add. Christ, he was a bigger fucking star in this segment than Roman and Cena put together. That is how over this dude is right now. And really, in a lot of ways, the confrontation with him and Roman wasn't anything remarkable. But the crowd energy during this, man. The visual of seeing Roman and Knight just doing the standoff like that. You know, that's a moment you look back on months from now and say, criminally underrated TV moment in 2023. Seeing that level of star power getting that kind of reaction, those moments are rare. Like, that's equivalent to Hogan Piper levels of crowd investment. And again, they didn't really need to say much. Roman's trying to undermine LA Knight, asking him what makes you so special to be standing in the same ring as me. To which Knight tells him that he's the fastest rising star in SmackDown history. Of course, the people are totally backing him with his catchphrases. And right as he and Roman look like they're about to come to blows, here comes Jimmy Uso to try to jump Knight, which goes poorly. Knight disposes of him almost instantly. And, well, I guess we're to believe that LA Knight had either the most lethal wind-up punch or Jimmy just vanished into the ether. Because we never saw Jimmy again after that toss out to the floor. He was just gone. Knight and Roman had the stare down. Roman backed off with Paulie and Solo. And then Roman turned to Solo in the aisleway and told him to finish the job. Forget Cena and go get LA Knight. And that was the big takeaway from the angle. And we'll talk more about the match later on, what this is all presumably setting up. And I'll sort of share my thoughts on everything and talk about whether or not I think it's a good idea right now. But it was a great opening segment. You know, this had Monday Night Wars, WWF Raw vibes of electricity in the room. The people were into it. The energy was high. You had major star power involved right from the jump. You know, they used something at the top of the program to set up an angle or a match for later in the night. A show running theme of sorts. They did a lot of things right here. Even if I have some reservations about what it's all leading to for that Saudi show in a few weeks. But again, I'll revisit that conversation later on. And as God is my witness, these writers had the balls after that huge opener with Roman and LA Knight. You throw Cena in the mix too. They go from that. Then they try to immediately subject me to Pretty Dreadly versus the Brawling Brutes. And that is the point where I said, it really is WWF Raw from 1998, isn't it? They went from Rock, Austin, and Vince to the fucking Job Squad versus the DOA. I was like, you gotta be kidding. And there's no way in hell I'm about to ruin the mood. And I don't need to be dealing with the suspect sissies on my television again. Especially not in those hideous fuchsia pink outfits. So I fast-forwarded about 9 minutes until the ridiculous finish, where the blonde sissy outsmarted Ridge Holland by feigning an injury so he could roll him up and pin him. That's when I officially determined that Holland's career was dead. I mean, I'm not going to harp on it much longer, but genuine question, and I really do mean this. Are there serious pro wrestling fans out there that actually enjoy these guys? If so, I need to know who they are immediately so I can disown them. How? Just the mere sight of them makes me want to instinctually reach for the remote. I don't get it. Them and Grayson Fodder, cut from the same cloth of that NXT 2.0 rebrand. Yeah, apparently I'm missing out on all the good stuff, aren't I? So moving on, we had a backstage pre-tape with Carlito and Bobby Lashley, which was a thing that existed on the show. If you combine both men's charisma and shook it up in a blender, you'd probably get about a quarter of a protein shake. But, well, long story short, Lashley was being a dick. So Carlito challenged Lashley to a TV match. And then the Street Profits jumped him. And right before Lashley went to tee off on Carlito's afro, here come Adam Pearce and Jason Jordan to send the heels packing. And that actually factored into the follow-up segment where Bayley tried to bitch to Adam about something, but he was obviously preoccupied with Carlito's terrible selling. So, well, then Zelina Vega got in her face. And for the first time in his entire life as a GM, by the way, keep that in mind for later, Pierce had enough of the so-called loud noises going on with all the girls screaming. So he booked him in a match. And for once, it didn't make Adam look incompetent for booking impromptu matches on the fly. Because I could totally buy in this given scenario a very easily relatable situation for a lot of men out there. Pierce probably just wanted these fucking annoying ladies out of his hair because they were bothering him. So he said, go away, wrestle a match, settle it in the ring, don't bother me. I mean, I'd done the same thing if I were in his shoes. Speaking of impromptu decisions, we had Roman rebuking Jimmy for trying to call an audible during the LA Knight segment, telling Jimmy, you ain't the quarterback, Oos. Let me take charge. Let me decide the audible calls. Plus, they've got other business to attend to right now. They got Brother Jay disrespecting the Bloodline legacy by teaming with Cody. And that spits in the face of the Samoan dynasty. So, well, he tells Jimmy to go fix the issue. So Jimmy told him, yeet. Which I think we've established by now is Gen Z code for yes. And that took us to Bayley versus Zelina. And at first, when Pierce set this up in that altercation minutes prior, my inclination was to just walk out of the room and wait for the finish so we could move on to other important matters on the show. Turns out it wasn't necessary. The bell rings. They wrestle for about 2 minutes. Zelina did some of the fakest looking lucha stuff I've ever seen. She also had one of the worst 619s I've ever seen. And then after Io ran a distraction on the apron, Bayley hit some wacky move they called the Rose Plant, and she pinned her. For 2 minutes, it was bad. And thank God it only went 2 minutes. And then the heels tried to jump Zelina after the bell. So who should come out to make the save but Charlotte Flair, galloping her way down the aisleway in high heels, which somehow prompted the heels to powder. I guess because in their minds, they believed there was no way they could possibly fend off slower than molasses Charlotte Flair charging the ring in fucking platform shoes. Ridiculous. So that was all no good. But then we come back for the other big thing of note on this week's show. Looking back, I'd maybe argue this was better than the opener with Roman Cena and Knight. At least when it came to the comedy relief. I'll admit, it's been a while since I can say I was genuinely entertained watching a SmackDown segment. Turns out all it took was Dom Mysterio to show up. Plus, you factor in Nick Aldis and Triple H, and obviously I'm getting ahead of myself with the Aldis thing, but I'll revert back to that in a sec. Tying all this in with the Adam Pearce discussion, on the same night I made a joke about Adam Pearce for the first time in his life actually being an effective GM on SmackDown, and not just being a walking doormat for the entire roster to stomp all over him. Sure enough, it is the exact same night that he is given a promotion from Hunter to now go oversee Monday Night Raw. And I'm not joking. That is what happened. Hunter tells Pearce that what he's done for the last 3 years on SmackDown is a thankless job. So now you're going to get to do the same thankless job. Just instead of it being 2 hours on a Friday night, it is now going to be 3 hours on a Monday night. This is a promotion. How? Exactly? Well, in any case, he's peachy as a clam to take the offer. And of course, that begs the obvious question. Who's going to fill Adam's shoes on SmackDown? Well, I can tell you who it wasn't. It was Dirty Dom. And this is where the segment turned around and became awesome. As poor Dom's out there getting roasted by the crowd. Anytime he tries to open his mouth, they're just pumping that canned heat meter up to about 1,000. Like even Hunter was taking insider shots at it, saying, man, I thought all that stuff was artificial crowd noise. Now that I'm standing here witnessing it in real time, now I'm seeing how authentic a lot of it really is. He's exaggerating. So, of course, Dom's trying to get out that he thinks that it's irresponsible to book Cody and Jay in a completely separate tag title match on SmackDown when the Judgment Day haven't gotten their rematch yet. Of course, Hunter's ribbing him by saying that he can't hear him over all the loud boos. And eventually he tells Dom that, well, he needs to take his issue up with the new GM of SmackDown, Nick Aldis. And, Aldis being under contract at WWE, I don't think is a revelation. I think most people already kind of knew about that, even though it was kept under the radar for the longest time. Once Aldis finally left that crapshoot that was Billy Corgan's NWA, I mean, Aldis almost immediately jumped aboard WWE in a backstage agenting role. I believe this is the first time we've actually seen him on camera, though. And he looked good. Decked out in the suit. Looked professional. It was cool. It was very good to see him. And he's always been a good promo. He's firing on all cylinders here. Delivering the best line to Dom. Dom, nice to meet you. I'm a huge fan of your father. Just totally disrespecting him. Of course, the people all pop for it. And it gets better as Dom tries to cut the promo on Aldis. Again, just getting showered with boos. So, of course, Hunter thinking on his feet. And this had to be a total ad-lib. There was no way this was scripted. He stops Dom mid-promo and goes, hang on a sec. That mic's not working. Try this one. And as he passes the other mic off to Dom, he immediately gets pooned again. I'm just howling watching all this go down. Dirty Dom was the best in this segment. And he's such a good sport about it. Like, everybody's having fun at his expense. He's trying to be a douchebag. People just never let him get a word in edgewise. But he's playing it up. And here's the thing, too. He's not letting it detract from what he's trying to be as a heel. He's still able to be a douchebag. He's still able to talk the people down. But it's like this constant tug of war to see, like, who's going to win in the battle. Is Dom going to win on the mic, or are the fans going to drown him out completely? But of course, the big payoff to all this. Nick says that since Jey Uso is now an official member of the Raw roster, SmackDown has needed a trade-off. So who should come out but Kevin Owens? And again, big pop for his music. But it was just KO. Sami Zayn was not there. And he goes down to the ring and immediately stuns Dom and leaves him for dead. And that instantly made KO the top babyface on SmackDown. That one move. But this was all good. I really enjoyed this segment. Dom was great. Aldis was great. Hunter was great. KO was great. Pierce was just kind of there, but he didn't detract from the segment in any way. And of course, it played up into the following pre-tape in the back in the Bloodlines locker room, where Roman's all bent out of shape that Cody and KO are back on his show running amok, after he figured they already handled that problem months ago. Now they're just back running roughshod on the Tribal Chief show like it's nothing. And he had some good banter with Jimmy here, like admonishing him in a condescending manner for drinking water on his couch, while he literally just told him to take care of business. And when Jimmy goes, wait, you serious? Roman goes, nah, I'm just joshing. But imagine if I was. And he slowly turns to look at Jimmy, and now the reality is setting in. Jimmy has now gotten the message. Roman ain't playing around. So he takes off and brings Solo with him. Got to admit, I'm digging semi-unhinged Roman Reigns. It's a new little wrinkle they've added into the character development. And you can't really tell if he's ribbing or if he's about to legitimately blow a gasket. He got all his subordinates on pins and needles the whole time, never knowing what to expect. Paulie's about to shit his pants. It's actually good plot development. The idea that Roman is losing control of his family, he can't even contain his own rage at this point. He's basically Ric Flair circa 1987 after Ron Garvin took the world title from him. Flair is just totally off the wall, batshit crazy. If Roman could somehow pull off the unhinged Flair personality, that actually might get over. Hey, I've been saying they need new ideas for the Bloodline forever. This would at least be highly entertaining to watch from week to week. But I guess we'll see. You know what I'm not looking forward to seeing? Jade Cargill versus Charlotte Flair. You had to fucking figure it was coming, right? You just knew. I didn't think it'd be that soon. I'll try to mentally prepare myself for that ahead of time. Of course, Charlotte was going to get first dibs on the new hot signing. Did you really think she wouldn't? How else can she take the piss out of the room? They couldn't even wait a month. They just immediately dive headfirst right into it. Before Jade's even worked a TV match. Fuck. Oh. As I continue to simmer on that for the next 3 months. Let's go ahead and talk about Cody and Jay versus Grayson and Austin Theory for the undisputed tag titles. Not that it'll take long to review, because there really wasn't much to say about it. It was a totally fine match. Nothing wrong with it. I don't think a single person in the world thought that Fodder and Theory stood a chance of actually winning the belts here. It was more so designed to give the champions a quick TV win. They're obviously going to be jumping between both brands now that they're the undisputed champions, so you got to have them on both shows. It looks like they've kind of established a formula with Jay and Cody as partners. Jay's been serving as the babyface in peril to build up to the Cody hot tag. That's fine. I mean, if you're going to do the Ricky-Robert dynamic, one of them's got to be Ricky and the other's got to be Robert, so it is what it is. I missed the part in Jay's character development where his head became made of complete lead. When did he become impervious to selling headbutts? I mean, I get he's Samoan. They've been known to have rather thick craniums. It's not like he's fucking Haku, where his entire body is basically made of lead. Jay's what, 220 pounds soaking wet? He's smaller than Cody. That's a little hard to wrap my head around. Get it. Like I said, it was what it was. Grayson still sucks. I don't get the hype with him at all. Theory's a talented worker. I say it every week. But he continues to get shoehorned into mid-card purgatory. More often than not with him jobbing out in the end. I mean, that's still one of the biggest unsung mysteries of WWE creative today, is the booking of Austin Theory. I'm also still not really sure about this double team combo Cody and Jay are using right now. They didn't really hit it properly at the Fastlane pay-per-view. Combining the 1D with the springboard cutter. Like here, Cody was way out of place to actually deliver the cutter move. So he just kind of fell onto his ass while Jay sort of drove Theory into the mat with a modified DDT. Didn't look good. They might need to work on that. Beyond that, Cody pinned Theory with the Crossroads. And right as they're about to leave, the Bloodline music cues up. And we've seen WWE do these little aisleway exchanges before, where you're trying to go from segment to segment with immediate transitions. So you have certain guys cross each other's paths in the aisleway. Here they had Cody and Roman doing a face-off, which was very well done. They didn't come to blows, but they sold it perfectly. If the idea was to plant in your head, this feud will be revisited in 2024, so keep it in your back pocket. They did a good job with it. You know, at least the LA Knight stuff open-ended, but it's a good way to keep people guessing. I think a lot of the smarter fans have figured that the Cody-Roman feud would be resumed at some point. Like, they had put it on the back burner for so long. Cody being drafted to Raw, the feud with Brock, him and Roman being on completely separate shows for all those months and doing their own thing. Like, it's good that they're actually taking the time to remind people of their history. You keep it fresh in everybody's minds as we approach Rumble season, because, I mean, you're going to rekindle that feud at some point. You got to remind everybody of what the beef was. But getting back to the subject of LA Knight here, let's talk about his match with Solo, closing things out this week. I actually wound up enjoying this a hell of a lot more than I thought I would. Now, again, part of that could have been the hot crowd, but I actually think these guys pieced together a pretty solid little match. It was very basic in terms of the layout, but they kind of had this story early on where Knight tried to use the power game over Solo, but it didn't go according to plan. Solo was able to cut him off by running him into the ring post. I did write down here, I don't know if maybe I was just seeing things or if the lighting in the arena was going all cattywampus. Did anybody else pick up on the overhead lights going blue? I just remember watching Knight and Solo in the ring at one point. All of a sudden, there was this weird blue shading overcasting the ring. Almost like somebody in the production truck hit a button and then all the overhead lights changed color. I mean, I think they ended up fixing it at one point, but it was really noticeable there for a few minutes. Yeah, but they come back with Solo working over Knight for a few minutes. They end up building to the spot where Solo goes for the seated splash, but Knight moves out of the way. Starts firing the comeback on Solo. I like the dramatic milking of Solo finally getting bumped off his feet. Knight having to throw a few punches and then firing off the ropes to hit the flying shoulder tackle. That got a big pop. And of course we get the awesome spot where Knight muscles up Solo with the snap power slam. Gives him the LA elbow. And, well, admittedly, the finish was kind of stupid. I mean, if for anything, it totally buried the referee and made him look like a total Neanderthal for not calling for a blatant DQ. Jimmy Uso hits the ring in plain view of the official. Tries to set up LA Knight for a spear. And of course, that's not bad enough. Who should then run into the ring to cut him off but John Cena? Just sliding into the ring right in front of the official. And he hits Jimmy with the AA. Ref's looking on like, oh, look at that. Two guys blatantly interfering right in front of my face. Guess we'll just let the match continue. No harm, no foul, right? So Cena eats a thrust kick from Solo about 2 seconds later. That was mildly funny. What a geek he turned out to be. And then LA Knight caught Solo with the BFT for the 3 count. A little bit of a chaotic finish at the end there. If you can overlook 2 guys deliberately getting involved at the end of a match that they were not assigned to, the rest of it was fine. And again, I mean, you see what they're obviously setting up here, because directly after the bell, the final send-off this week was Roman coming down to spear Knight. So they're obviously off to the races with wherever this is going. Presumably the Saudi Arabia show. Whenever that is. Is it the last week of October? First week of November? It's got to be one of those weekends. I'll have to double check on that at some point. Well, before I go over to NXT, let me just kind of put a cap on this SmackDown report here. Overall, I thought it was a pretty fun show. I definitely noticed a heavy increase in name power this week. And boy, does it make a world of difference. It really does. Like when you see people who are genuinely over with the fans and they actually give a shit about the talent, I'm telling you, man, it can take a mediocre segment and make it 1,000 times better by comparison. LA Knight is on fire right now. He's probably, if not undoubtedly, the most over babyface in the company. Maybe even well above Cody. Which really starts to call into question the obvious. Okay. If they're going to go through with this, what's the end goal with LA Knight versus Roman Reigns? Is that really just going to be a one-and-done blow-off at Crown Jewel in 3 weeks? Because if it is, I might be expressing some concern with that thought process. When we talk about how rare it is in wrestling these days that somebody organically and authentically gets over with the crowd, like the Bryan Danielson type admiration, the kind of admiration to where the fans would willingly hijack TV shows just to chant the guy's name because they understood that he was being actively disrespected and devalued. So often is the case where WWE will try to force somebody into that top spot. We've seen it time and time again. Regardless of whether or not they're ready, or regardless of whether or not the fans are willing to accept it. WWE has had a storied habit of trying to groom stars for the top spots. But how many times have we seen other talents start to naturally get over instead? Because for one reason or another, the fans decided, we want this guy. If WWE decides we want X star to be the next big thing, the WWE fans say, no, we want Y star instead. And it starts to become this tug of war dilemma where it's the corporate machine versus the fan base. And more often than not, who wins that battle? It's usually the machine. I'm not going to sit here and insinuate that they're jumping the gun with the LA Knight title match. But with where he is in the pecking order right now, specifically with how white hot that guy is, the fact that the fans are head over heels for this gimmick, that's what I'm afraid of. The budding two schools of thought right now between what the fans want versus what the company wants. I'm afraid that WWE just sees him as challenger of the month for Roman. That all this LA Knight push is designed to do is to give Roman another guy to beat. As they continue to build up the rematch with him and Cody for next year's WrestleMania. Because that obviously is the long-term endpoint. Meanwhile, the reality is, the fans might see it a totally different way. They may not be as excited to see Cody beat Roman as much as they might be excited to see LA Knight be the one to beat Roman. Which one's going to get the bigger reaction? At least for where we are right now. Think about it this way. If Knight just loses to Roman at Crown Jewel, what does that do to his momentum? How badly does he get derailed after the fact? Isn't that just going to be another chapter in the WWE sabotage playbook? Taking somebody that was white hot and then immediately cooling them off because they decided, we don't want this person to be the guy. So rather us changing course and running with something that naturally fell into our lap, we'll just yank the rug out from under him and ruin any possibility of that guy ever staying over. It's not out of the ordinary for WWE booking. And I'm just very apprehensive that this is how they're going to handle the LA Knight push. Because at this point, it's between him and Cody. One of those two guys are being slated to beat Roman for the belt. And whereas a year ago, I might have advocated for it to be Cody. But you know what? Things change. And for where we are now, in this moment, in late October of 2023, you've got to objectively ask yourself, even if you're a huge Cody Rhodes fan, and even if you still like the idea of Cody being the one to finish the story, being the one to end Roman's 1,000+ day title reign, even if it makes all the sense in the world, is it truly the right call at this point? Again, yes, it makes storyline sense. But is it going to get the right reaction? That's what you have to be concerned about. Once we get to Rumble season, how is the landscape going to be different? If WWE is set in their ways by then, it's Cody versus Roman at Mania, fans be damned. Okay. You can roll the dice. You can take that risk. What happens if the fans reject it? What happens if Cody wins the Rumble and the fans boo him? What do you do then? We've seen this story play out plenty of times before. Oddly enough, with Roman being at the forefront of the conversation. The hostile WWE crowd rejected the babyface push of Roman for years in WWE. They also rejected the year Danielson was intentionally left out of the Rumble. And y'all remember, it was so bad, they basically forced WWE's hand to where they had to book Danielson in the main event of WrestleMania. Elsewise, there would have been a fucking riot in the building. And like I said, the people like Cody. But if it comes at the expense of sacrificing LA Knight's momentum, WWE's very arrogant to think that the fans won't turn on them at the drop of a hat like that. And not even necessarily turning on Cody, but turning on the company for insulting them, which in turn would be a direct reflection of them booing Cody. And well, again, we'll see what they have planned, but I don't think this is a conversation that people should overlook. I'm a little skeptical with what the end goal might be in all this. I'm just thinking about LA Knight's future. I'm thinking about his long-term story direction. Once you get through this Saudi show, you have Roman go over LA Knight, regardless of whether or not he has to cheat to do it. Does he ever get a rematch? What happens after the fact? Do you just drop him down the card and book him back in the mid-card again? Are the fans going to be receptive to that? Are they going to accept it? My guess would probably be no. I've been proven wrong before. Plenty of times. I just don't like WWE's chances with how they're doing this. I think they're pulling the trigger on this a little too soon. But that's just me. And as we round out things with NXT for the week, well, for this show in particular, you basically had one thing of value on the entire show, at least what anything was built around. I believe the first ever clash between Bo Dallas and Sami Zayn for the NXT title, as they had previously set up with the Bo Dallas Invitational Gauntlet, where Sami pulled the heist of the century. That's Michael Cole's favorite catchphrase, at least when it comes to mentioning Seth Rollins. But in storyline, Sami pulled a fast one on Bo a couple weeks ago after being banned from participating in the Invitational Gauntlet. Sami dressed up under the Lucha gimmick to weasel his way into the match using a different gimmick. So, I guess he got the stamp of approval. But like I said, that's what the show was mainly built around. And we did have a few other things of note this week. It wasn't a total one-match show. Actually kicking things off right from the beginning, one of those highlights being the fallout to the NXT title rematch. Completely unadvertised, yes, but 2 weeks after Adrian Neville and Corey Graves dropped the straps on television to the Ascension, well, here they are, just randomly getting their title rematch with no setup or prior notice. They just went right into it cold. I guess that's WWE's logic of the previous champions being entitled to rematches. regardless of whether or not they've actually earned the title rematch. No promos, no angles, no nothing. They did nothing to properly set it up. It was just, whatever, let's do it again. Now, that's not to take anything away from it. The first match these guys had, I actually thought was pretty good. Here they try to tell a little bit of a different story, whereas in the first match, Neville and Graves walked in as the champions. Now it's the Ascension in the driver's seat. And they actually had a different formula with how the heat portion was done for this match. I think it was in the previous bout, it was Corey Graves that ended up taking the bulk of the beating so that Neville could make the valiant babyface comeback. Well, in this match, right before their break spot, they shot an angle where Neville got dumped out to the floor and tweaked his ankle. So this time they had Neville fighting from underneath. And this is actually kind of cool with how they set this up. Total sleazy move on Corey's part, but I actually thought this was well executed. After Corey gets the hot tag, he's in there running wild for about a minute, and he gets cut off by the heels who try to work over his ribs. And Corey basically cowers back to his corner so he can tag back in Neville, who, mind you, is still selling the bum ankle. So Corey immediately goes out to the apron, and Neville's looking at him like, dude, what the fuck? I'm still not fully recovered here. So naturally, Neville gets back in. He's immediately targeted by the Ascension. And they do a few more things before Neville gets rammed into Corey on the apron. And then they put away Neville with the Fall of Man. In essence, the whole thing was basically an extended angle to execute the split with Neville and Graves. The Ascension retaining was kind of a foregone conclusion. It is kind of weird to look back and remember how quickly all of that unfolded. Like, I remember Graves and Neville breaking up and feuding. I just didn't remember how it all basically happened within the span of like 2 weeks. There was never any prior tension between the two. They never did anything to tease dissension at any point. Right up until they lost the belts, they were a totally cohesive unit. All it took was one loss, and Graves flipped his lid and turned heel. Probably a little rushed if we're trying to nitpick the booking aspect of things. And of course, Tony Dawson's commentary was fucking rancid beyond belief. Oh, geez. Corey Graves beating up his own tag partner. I wonder what that's about. Couldn't have been any more nonchalant with his delivery. There are very few things I remember about Tony Dawson in WWE. Now that I'm reflecting back on his brief stint as the NXT play-by-play guy, he fucking sucked. I'm wondering when the commentary gets better on this show. When does Morrow show up? Is that like 4 years from now? God, that's going to be a rough patch to get through. What happened to Tom Phillips and Alex Riley? Weren't they doing commentary at one point? Or was this before they settled on an actual commentary team and they just kind of bounced people around? Well, William Regal was there. He wasn't much better, but he at least showed some honest-to-God emotion at times. God, Tony Dawson, he was a fucking houseplant. But there you have it. Corey Graves is now a heel. And fast forward about 6 months, he's basically retired from in-ring competition due to concussion issues. Not that we're supposed to know about that. That's the future me talking. But then we came back for Tyler Breeze versus CJ Parker, where Breeze vowed to, quote, end the career of CJ Parker with one snapshot. I'm not kidding you. That was how Tony plugged this before the break. The cliffhanger, the tease, was career finality. A retirement match. Just randomly here in the middle of the show, CJ Parker's career could come to an end, courtesy of a spinning sidekick. Meanwhile, Regal spent the entire match making fun of CJ Parker for looking homeless. And the fans got on Parker's case immediately by chanting, "Fruity Pebble." Yeah. That was the point where this man knew he was Japan-bound. He immediately came to the realization, I need to get the fuck out of this place, because they've saddled me with a death gimmick. And he wasn't wrong. Of course, Breeze is a total babyface here, despite the fact that he was supposed to be the heel. This is like that Terry Taylor match we talked about on Crockett TV the other week. Taylor's out there trying to be the most dirtbag of all dirtbag heels. He's doing everything in the book to get the fans to hate him. They're still cheering him like God. Anyway, they do some stuff for a couple minutes. The match was a total nothing burger. Breeze ended up thumbing Parker in the eyes during a distraction spot. And then he caught him with the beauty shot spin kick for the 3. After which, Breeze tried to take a selfie with Parker, but ended up getting a palm thrust to the face. And the fans booed. Naturally. And that was it. So what did we learn here? We learned that Tyler Breeze was super over with the crowd, despite being miscast as a heel. And CJ Parker was a terrible gimmick from day one. So he definitely made the right call when he reinvented himself in New Japan by becoming Juice Robinson. And boy, isn't that telling. Where's Juice Robinson today? Well, he's one of the more heavily pushed guys on AEW TV most weeks. Meanwhile, correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't think we've heard anything about Tyler Breeze in at least 2 or 3 years, right? When did he get let go from WWE? Was it like right at the tail end of the Scamdemic era? I don't even know if he's still active in the business today. You don't hear much about Tyler Breeze anymore. My, how time changes. Anyway, moving along. We had some action with the ladies. Yeah. It is Paige and Emma versus the team of Summer Rae and Sasha Banks. Better known as the BFFs. Beautiful, fierce females. Sorry. I just threw up a little. I almost threw up watching this match. Fuck, this is horrible. You know, it's wild how time can really change your perspective on things. For years, I had to hear people constantly talk on the internet about how great the women's wrestling was in NXT. Oh, it's so much better than that Divas bullcrap on the main roster. Yeah, they actually treat the women like real pro wrestlers down in NXT. So, of course, what am I watching on my television less than 30 seconds into this match? Well, I'm watching Paige scream like a squawking harpy. They're doing the sloppiest catfight spots you've ever seen. Occasionally, you would see them do some basic mat work. That's probably being generous. It's 4 ridiculously green girls having a bad indie match. Just better production value. Summer Rae in particular was outlandishly horrible. Did I hear them say that she was the current reigning Divas champion during this period? Which I guess would have had to been on the main roster, right? Because I don't think they had a Divas belt down in NXT. I don't even know if they had a women's belt in NXT by this point. She was the top female of the company at this point. in kayfabe. That had to be a rib. There's no way. No joke. She was easily the worst worker among the 4 girls involved. Not even close. There's no way she was the champion. I don't buy it. So the match is rolling along. It ends up breaking down with all 4 girls at the end. And after Paige is in there cleaning house for a minute, she hits Summer Rae with a Fisherman's Buster. And I don't even remember how they got here. Somehow she got distracted by Emma and Sasha fighting on the floor. And then Summer Rae just turned around and hit her with a standing something resembling a leg drop. That is exactly what I wrote down. And that is how she pinned Paige. Yes. Summer Rae pinned Paige. In 2013. Of all girls to put over in the match, the one girl that ought to have been doing the job. No, of course they fucking put her over. And I never liked Paige to begin with, but good God. Yeah. Women's revolution. Get ready to hear that propaganda rammed down your throat for the next 10 years. I mean, they were still calling them divas even by this point. I guess the activists weren't coming out of the woodwork yet. We didn't have Stephanie on Raw propping up the women as the greatest thing since sliced bread. Now, that wasn't for another couple of years. Well, anyway, let's try to remove all the feminist talk here. Let's move ahead with the main event. We've been waiting with bated breath for the NXT Championship. It is Sami Zayn and Bo Dallas. Sami the challenger, Bo the champion. If you have not been following the program, I guess I should clue you into that. Oh, and actually, I lied. I need to put a pause in the review right now and actually give Tony Dawson some credit for something. Ever the professional this man was, approximately 1 minute after the opening bell, during the feel-out process, the NXT fans decided to go into business for themselves by trying to get on Bo's case. So, of all chance, what did they say? They go, Bo has boobies. And again, Tony Dawson, ever the pro, totally deadpan, just goes, championship level intensity here as the fans are totally locked in. I was dying. As the NXT fans are laughing at Bo's man titties, Tony Dawson, not even batting an eyelash, just kept commentating like it was nothing out of the ordinary. So, well, at the point they rang the bell to officially begin the match, they had about 20 minutes left in the show. I figured there was nothing else I was going to follow it, but, even 20 minutes for these guys back in the day kind of seemed like a little long. So they actually booked a clever angle here to splice up the action a little bit. A dusty finish of sorts. They're about 3 or 4 minutes in. Bo's pulling out like every desperate ploy he can to try to get a pinfall on Sami, to no avail. And from literally out of nowhere, Sami catches Bo with the haluva kick in the corner. Right as he's going for the pin, you see Bo methodically roll himself close enough to the rope so he can get a foot underneath. And of course, Sami thinks he's won the belt after the initial 3 count. Fans are buying it. But here comes General Manager John Bradshaw Layfield to wave off the call almost immediately. And this is where the heel authority figure in wrestling is actually kind of useful. Because, of course, Bradshaw, well, he's not going to let the scrappy underdog babyface get away with a fluke win like that. He's immediately out there to rain on this guy's parade. And I love how Bradshaw scolded the official here. After they show the replay on film, JBL points to the ring and goes, "Referee, Don't make me learn your name. Restart the match. Just totally burying this guy 10 feet under. But the delivery was impeccable. I actually forgot about that too. Wasn't that a Vinceism? At least I think it was for a period of time. They kind of waived that rule eventually, but wasn't that a thing in WWE for years? That the officials were never allowed to be recognized on television? They just didn't have names. It was just the referee or the assigned official. I know they kind of broke away from that formula a little later on, but I think that was a thing in WWE. Oh, anyway. So, of course, the match is restarted as we come back from break. At this point, pretty much every smart fan in the crowd knew, all right, the jig is up. Sami's clearly not winning this match now. Some still pop for all Sami's near falls, so, I mean, there were definitely a handful of casuals in the crowd that still thought he stood a chance. Of course, by this point, all the drama is centered around the false finishes and the big moves. They're hitting each other with just about everything in the book. And then they kind of took the piss out of the room with the heat finish. And I'll concede, the way they executed this probably could have come off better, mostly with the way the official handled it. Sami gives Bo a series of German suplexes, and I think it was after the first one, he ends up ripping the corner turnbuckle pad off. And of course, if you remember NXT from this time, these turnbuckle pads were pretty damn thick. Like, you'd have to be blind not to see these things laying around. So, of course, there's this giant black turnbuckle exposed, laying right in the middle of the ring. Clearly, it's just hanging out in broad daylight. And it takes the official until the third and final German sequence to realize, shit, dude. There's a giant turnbuckle pad on the ground. Let me snag that and conveniently turn away for about 5 minutes so Bo can ram Sami headfirst into the corner. Oh, hey, look, pinfall attempt. 1, 2, 3. Bo retains. It was comically terrible. How you would say, poor execution. Maybe they would have thought about retaping that. I mean, I see what they were going for, but it's just so lame. After all that piss and vinegar people were feeling, just suck the energy out of the room with that wacky finish. And of course, it's made lamer by the fact that the ref had to play dumb afterwards and check on Sami like, what the fuck happened? As if it wasn't evidently apparent. Finish aside, the action was very good. The people were totally hanging on to every false finish with Sami. They really wanted to convince themselves this guy stood a chance. Tonight was the night. It was Sami's moment. No, of course, they got fucked in the end. But it was great. Gave more time to develop and establish Sami on TV. Bo Dallas is still the champ, so we get a few more peak months of him as the top heel before he goes off and gets ruined on the main roster. And we'll see how everything develops from here. Like I said, we got Neville eventually being introduced into the title hunt, so it's all methodically being planned out. You can see the vision, what they're laying out. A blueprint of sorts. And again, it's easy enough to say it was a one-match show, but even with the tag title opener, we got the official split with Graves and Neville, so that's another layer to the NXT story development we'll see over the next month or two. Match wasn't anything special, but it really wasn't about the match, it was about the afterbirth. But really enjoyable watch. Minus the girls' match, because that was awful, but at least that only went like 5 minutes. Parker and Breeze was just kind of a short squash win for Breeze to get over, continuing his momentum. I actually neglected to mention how instrumental he becomes in the main event picture soon. I vaguely remember them factoring him into the title hunt. I don't believe he was ever the champion at any point, but he was definitely one of the secondary top heels for a brief period, even though the fans kept cheering him. But again, though, talk about it all the time, man. This is what wrestling is supposed to be. You're building new guys. You're moving people up and down the card, respectively. The roster rotation is cyclical, but there's always new, fresh stuff to look forward to. It's good stuff. You know, again, the sad conversation we always revert back to is, how did so many of these guys get ruined on the main roster? Well, the short answer is, duh, Vince. And I hate to leave it at that, but that really is the answer in a lot of ways. It was Hunter's vision of the future of WWE versus Vince's current reality. And, you know, you really think about it. Had this version of NXT come about 10 years later, and we look at this exact NXT model in 2023 versus 2013, how would the landscape have changed? Would some of these guys actually stood a chance to become major stars instead of just underneath guys or mid-card guys that got run out of the company because for whatever reason, Vince didn't see anything in them? It's unfortunate, but it's a harsh reality when you look back at this time. Vince was trying to prop guys up. He was trying to build a new generation of talent. Unfortunately, it just wasn't Vince's version of the new generation of talent. But it is what it is. We cannot dwell on the past. We must move forward. Because you know what they say, Raw rolls on. I've heard that a time or two. I've heard them pitched a commercial here saying the exact same thing. NXT rolls on. Was another one of Vince's favorite terms. But why don't you say we roll on out of here? Because I think we've overstayed our welcome this week. Thanks everybody for tuning in to the 5 Starr Wrestling Report podcast. We will be back on Friday for the Classic Wrestling Talk. Just moving our way through the Crockett Archives, the Mid-South, and the World Class Archives. And eventually we'll make room so we can talk about Starrcade 87. We'll probably end up doing that on the Friday show, but we'll see. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Take care, everybody. Peace out.